"Where did you get that ring?" The Duke of Vauncey had crossed half the length of the assembly room before he heard his own voice ask it, and the whole of his careful composure had gone out of him in an instant. Raphael, Duke of Vauncey, who never raised his voice, who never showed his hand, who had buried his grief so deep that society believed he had none, stood now staring at the ring upon a startled young woman's finger as though it were a ghost. It was. He had not seen that ring in 17 years. He had last seen it on his mother's hand, the night before she died, when she had pressed it to her lips and bid him remember her by it. It had vanished from her chamber within the hour of her death, never recovered, and he had grown from a grieving boy of 12 into a cold, solitary man believing it gone forever. A gold band, worn thin, set with a small dark sapphire and 2 seed pearls, and engraved within, he knew, with 3 words in his mother's own girlhood hand. He did not need to read them. He had read them in his dreams for half his life. "Your Grace," the young woman said, very pale, "you look at me as though I had done some wrong. I assure you I have not." The whole assembly had turned to stare. The Duke of Vauncey, famously remote, famously cold, struck motionless before a nobody at a country gathering, and he did not care. He had no thought to spare for them. "Forgive me," he said, low and unsteady. "I beg you. But that ring, you must tell me where you came by it. It was—" He could not finish. His throat had closed. The young woman drew her hand protectively to her breast, covering the ring with her other palm. She was no great lady. Her gown was clean but much mended, her gloves donned at one finger, and she had come to the assembly, he gathered, as the paid companion to a stout dowager who was even now staring with her mouth open. But the girl's chin was steady, and her eyes, grey-blue, wary, met his without flinching. "It was given to me," she said, "long ago, by a woman who was kind to me when no one else in the world was. I have worn it since I was a child. It is the only thing of any value I possess, Your Grace, and the only thing I have ever been loved enough to be given. I will thank you not to look at me as though I had stolen it." "Loved enough to be given," he repeated, and something in him bent. "And the woman who gave it, her name?" "Hannah," the girl said. "Hannah, a nurse, in the great house where my mother had been a servant before she died. I was an orphan there, of no account to anyone, set to scrub and carry before I was 8 years old. Hannah took a liking to me, and when she lay dying she put this in my hand, and made me swear never to part with it. She said it'd been given her in trust, by a great lady with a charge upon it, but she was far gone by then, and died before she could tell me the whole. I am Belinda Foss, Your Grace. I have nothing to hide." The name of the house, when she gave it, struck the Duke like a blow, for it was the very house, the Vauncey dower house in the north, where his mother had died. He sat down rather suddenly upon the nearest chair. "Miss Foss," he said, when he could command himself, "I am not mad, though I have given you every reason to think me so. That ring belonged to my mother, the late Duchess of Vauncey. She died in that house when I was a boy of 12. The ring disappeared the night she died and was never found. I have grieved its loss for 17 years. To see it now upon a living hand, you cannot imagine what it is to me. Will you do me the very great kindness of sitting and telling me all you know? I will be in your debt for the rest of my life." Something in the rawness of him reached her. Belinda Foss looked at this proud, cold Duke whose voice had cracked over the word mother, and the wariness in her eyes gave way to a gentler thing. "I will tell you what little I know," she said, "but I will not give up the ring, not even to you. I swore it to a dying woman, and I keep my word." "I would not take it from you for the world," he said, and meant it. They sat together in a quiet alcove away from the staring crowd, and Belinda told him what she knew, which was not much, and yet was enough to change the whole shape of his grief. Hannah had been the late Duchess's own nurse and confidante in those last lonely years, for his mother had spent her final seasons at the dower house, estranged from his father, the old Duke, a hard and bitter man who had loved no one and least of all his wife. And the Duke now understood the thing his family had never spoken of, that his father had let her waste in that cold house, friendless, and had carried away her jewels before she was even in the ground, all but this one ring, which the Duchess, with the last of her strength, had pressed upon faithful Hannah Vell, begging her to keep it from the old Duke's hands and give it one day to someone who would love it for her sake and not for its gold. She told Hannah, Belinda said softly, to give it to someone good, someone treated unkindly by the world, as she herself had been. She wanted it to bring comfort to a hard life, not ornament an easy one. And Hannah, when she was dying in her turn, looked at me, a poor scrubbing orphan no one else had ever spared a kind word, and said I was the one. Belinda looked down at the small worn band, and her grey-blue eyes shone. I have gone hungry many a winter, and that ring would have fed me for a year. I never sold it. It was the only proof I ever held that I was worth giving something to. The Duke of Vauncey sat very still. His grief for his mother, which he had carried frozen and silent for 17 years, was breaking up within him like ice in a thaw, and beneath it he found a strange, fierce gladness. "May I see the inside of the band?" he asked. "There should be an inscription. I will not keep it. I only wish to read it once in the candlelight, with my own eyes." With careful, trusting fingers she drew the ring from her hand and gave it to him. He held it to the candle flame and turned it, and there, worn nearly smooth, but legible still to a man who had wept over those words as a boy, were the 3 words his mother had engraved in her girlhood, before her hard marriage, when she had still believed in love, "Light to me." The Duke of Vauncey bowed his head over the small gold band, and for the first time in 17 years, in a public assembly room with curious upon him, he wept. "My mother chose you," he said at last, his voice unsteady, returning the ring to her hand and closing her fingers gently over it. "Do you understand, Miss Foss? Of all the souls in the world she desired her lost treasure given to one who had been unloved and unlucky and was good in spite of it. She reached out of her grave to find you and found a woman who would starve sooner than betray a dying nurse's trust. She chose better than she knew." In the weeks that followed, the Duke of Vauncey did a number of things that scandalized his household. He brought Belinda Foss to Vauncey, not as a servant nor a charity, but as an honored guest, the keeper of his mother's last gift. He sat with her in the long portrait gallery before the painting of a fair, sad-eyed woman in blue, and asked her to tell him, over and over, every word Hannah Vell had spoken of his mother. Through Belinda he came to know the woman his mother had truly been, and the cold fortress of his heart, which his father had built and grief had sealed, began at last to open. And as it opened he saw the woman before him plainly. He saw that Belinda Foss, who had been a scrubbing orphan, had a quiet dignity no duchess of his acquaintance could match. She went through his great house, touching nothing, grateful for the smallest courtesy, and she had a way of noticing the overlooked, a tired footman, a frightened scullery girl, a lame old hound the household had forgotten, and speaking to them with a gentleness that came, he understood, from having once been the lowest of all. She was, in the deepest sense, exactly the soul his mother had described, one whom the world had used cruelly, and who had answered with kindness instead of bitterness. "You look at me strangely, your grace," she said to him one evening in the gallery, half smiling, as though you were trying to read something written very small. "I am trying to understand," said the Duke, "how a woman who has been given so little can have so much to give. I have lived among people who possess everything and value nothing. You possessed one ring, and would die before you parted with it, because someone had loved you enough to give it. I find I cannot stop thinking on the difference." "You make too much of me," she said, colouring. "I make exactly enough of you," he answered. "It is the rest of my life I have been making too little of." It was Belinda, in those quiet weeks, who gave him the gift he had not known he needed. For Hannah Vell had pressed upon her not only the ring but a small worn letter, kept hidden for 17 years, Belinda had carried it sewn into the lining of her one good petticoat, never daring to open another woman's last words. Now, trembling, she laid it in his hands. "I think it was meant for you," she said. "Hannah said only that it was for the boy. I know now who the boy must be." The Duke unfolded the brittle paper, and there, in the faded hand he remembered from the fly-leaves of his childhood books, was his mother's voice across 17 silent years. She had written it in her last days, knowing she was dying, knowing her husband would never let it reach her son. She wrote that she loved him, and begged him not to become hard as his father was hard. "Keep something soft in you," she had written, "for the world has soft and needful people in it, and the measure of a man is how he treats the ones who can give him nothing. I gave my ring to a kind woman to give to a kind soul. Be kind, my dearest boy. Be warm." The Duke read it twice, then sat a long while with it against his heart, and Belinda sat quietly beside him and let him grieve, asking nothing, the way she had once been the only one to ask nothing of a dying nurse. "She begged me to be kind to the needful," he said at last, very low, "and the ring she gave away to teach me how came back to me on the hand of the kindest soul I have ever met. I begin to believe my mother had a hand in this, from wherever she now is." Society, of course, talked. A duke who installed a nameless orphan companion at his estate, who silenced with one cold glance any fine lady who dared to sneer at her mended gown, invited every kind of whisper, and the whispers grew cruel, until at last, one grey evening, Belinda went to him to take her leave, her few poor things packed into the same small bundle she had carried into the house. "I must go, your grace," she said, her voice steady though her hands were not. "I will not be the cause of talk that touches your mother's name. She was treated unkindly enough in her life." She held out the ring upon her open palm. "I will give you back nothing but this, which is yours by right, and go where I came from." The Duke looked at the small worn band, offered up at last after she had starved sooner than part with it, and understood what it cost her, that she was giving away the only thing that had ever told her she was worth loving, because she believed it the price of his peace. "Put it back upon your hand," he said quietly. "You will not go, Belinda. If society cannot abide you here, then it is society that will be shown the door. I have endured the good opinion of those people for 29 years and found it worth precisely nothing. I will not trade you for it. Stay. I am asking you to stay." He closed her fingers gently over the band. "Have you not understood why?" She had begun, he saw, to understand, but did not yet dare to believe it, and so he did not press her that night. He waited, and not long after, on a frost-bright morning in the portrait gallery, beneath his mother's painted gaze, he made his choice known to her. "I have something to ask you," he said, "and you must not answer it out of gratitude, for I could not bear that. You owe me nothing. If anything, the debt runs the other way. You brought me my mother back, and a piece of my own heart I thought long dead. I have lived alone in this house since I was 12, content to be feared and cold, because cold men cannot be hurt as my mother was hurt. And then you walked into an assembly room wearing her ring, and would not give it up even to a duke, and I have not had a moment's peace from you since." "Your Grace," she began, her voice trembling. "Raffle," he said. "I should like to hear you call me Raffle." He took her hand, the hand that wore the ring, in both of his. "My mother engraved 3 words inside that band when she was a girl who still believed in love. Light to me. She bade a nurse find someone good and unlucky and kind. I have come to believe she was not only giving away a ring, Belinda, that across all those years she was reaching forward to give me you. You have been light to me. From the moment I saw you, this dark house has not been so dark." He went down upon one knee on the cold gallery floor, the proud and feared Duke of Vauncey, before a woman in a mended muslin gown. "Marry me. Let the world say what it likes. Wear my mother's ring as my wife, and let her last gift come home at last, to your hand and to mine together." Belinda Foss stood very still, and the tears ran freely down her face, and she did not trouble to hide them. "I have been given things before, she whispered. A kind word here, a ring once, a memory of a mother I scarcely knew. I learned to make a whole life out of very little, and to want nothing more, because wanting more only breaks a poor woman's heart. She drew her hand from his and laid it instead against his cheek, the first time she had touched him, and her grey-blue eyes were luminous. But I find I do want more, Raphael. I want you. Not your house, nor your name, nor your mother's gold. Only you, the lonely man who wept over a ring in a crowded room and was not ashamed. Yes, with all my heart, yes. He came to his feet and gathered her gently into his arms, and they stood together a long while beneath the painting of the sad-eyed Duchess in blue, who seemed, in the morning light through the high windows, almost to be smiling. They were married in the spring, in the small chapel at Vauncey, and society came after all, for no one wished to be absent when the cold Duke of Vauncey married for love. Belinda wore the worn sapphire ring, cleaned and its 3 small words deepened, upon her finger as she spoke her vows. And when the Duke slid his own band beside it, he bent and murmured, so that only she could hear, the words his mother had written half a lifetime before. "Light to me," he said, "you have been and you will be all the days of my life." And the Duke of Vauncey, who had asked a stranger in a crowded room where she had got that ring, learned that he had been asking, without knowing it, the way home to a heart he never expected to find, and that his mother, in giving away her lost treasure, had given him the only thing in the world he had truly lacked,